Hello community! Welcome back to the Rasa Masterclass, where we continue diving into the topic of what comes after you build a simple version of your assistant. Today, we will talk about how Rasa X enables you to easily share your assistant with real testers, collect the conversations they have with your assistant, and use them to make the improvements. Once your assistant is capable of handling at least a few of the most important happy path stories, and you are happy with how an assistant handles the conversations with you, the next step in your development workflow should be inviting some real users to test your assistant and making some minor, major, or architectural changes based on what you learn from the conversations you collected between those users and your assistant. It's the middle step between the development stage, where you rely on manually generated training data, and the deployment stage, where you open up your assistant to a wide audience of users. Inviting some test users to talk to your assistant in between those stages will help you spot and make the necessary improvements to make sure that real users have good experience when talking to your assistant once it's deployed into production. Rasa X comes with a bunch of very useful features which allow you to easily share your assistant with real testers, collect the conversations they have with your assistant, then review them and decide on what improvements you should work on next. So let's go back to the Rasa X UI and see how it all works in practice. Conversations tab of the Rasa X UI is the main place where it all happens. This is the place where you will find the conversations real users have with your assistant, which will show up as follows. You will see how many conversations you have, the dates when the conversations happened, and the actual conversations themselves. If you haven't shared your assistant with real testers just yet, this section will be empty. So first, let's see how you can invite real testers to talk to your assistant. At the top right, you can find an icon called Share with Guest Testers. This is exactly what we need. Here, you can provide some details about your assistant, for example, the name and the description of what your assistant does. Once you are happy with the details, hit Generate Link. This link can be shared with whoever you would like to test your assistant, your friends, family, colleagues, or maybe even a specific group of people you picked for a user test. As you can see, in our specific case, the URL that we generated has our server IP address in it. External users will still be able to test our assistant, but I would highly recommend you configuring DNS and SSL for your server so that real users would see the URL, which is more familiar for the public eye, instead of seeing an IP address. Once the invited test users click on the link that you shared, they will see a simple chat UI on their browser where they can immediately talk to your assistant. Nothing to set up and nothing to install. So, for example, our test user may have a conversation that looks as follows. It's important to note that multiple test users can talk to your assistant at the same time. The conversations they have are stored in a database on your server and are displayed in a Conversations tab of the Rasa X UI for you to review. At this point, I really want to emphasize that all of the conversations you collect and view using Rasa X are stored on your server, which means that you completely own your data. They are not shared with Rasa, and it's you who can decide who, when, and how should have an access to the data you use to build your assistants. Just a quick reminder that you can find all of the files of your assistant on your server, including the models, actions, all the configurations, and even a DB itself. After some testers chatted to your assistant, you can review the conversations they had with your assistant in a Conversations tab of the Rasa X UI. Each conversation has a timestamp of when it happened. To make the review process easier, you can apply different filters on those conversations. For example, you can filter them by the intents or actions that happened throughout the conversation, or a number of user messages included in a story. There are quite a few things you can learn by reviewing the conversations and decide on what changes to make. Minor changes can be something like improving your NLU model to classify specific intents better. For example, here an assistant failed to classify this message hello as greeting. This could be an indication that we should include a few more rare examples of greetings in our training data. Major changes could be something bigger, like creating new intent or adjusting the logic of your stories. Architectural changes could be something like changing our custom action or configurations. For example, here we have a user who is based in London, but our custom action can only handle the requests from the US-based users. In this case, we would either have to update our custom action and include some kind of location validation, or update our custom action with a new API, which finds help facilities in the locations outside of the US as well. The conversations you collect can be easily used to improve your NLU models as well. If you head to NLU training section of the Rasa X UI, you can find all inputs that test users typed when talking to your assistant. You can review them, annotate them, and use them to improve your NLU models. If some examples aren't helpful, like the following, which was extracted as an entity, such inputs can be simply deleted. After you make the changes, annotate the new data, you should train the new model, make it active, and share your assistant with real testers once again to collect new conversations. Whenever you make improvements, don't forget to version control your assistant. Once you make a change, annotate new training data, change model configurations, or anything else, you will see that Rasa's integrated version control icon turns orange, suggesting you that there are some changes you made that Git server does not include. To include those changes, you can commit them to the master branch or create a new one. Once you do that, you should find a pull request on your assistant's Git repository with suggested changes. You can open a PR, invite team members to review and merge it, and continue with the improvements of your assistant. The process of inviting real testers to talk to your assistant, making the improvements based on the collected conversations, then sharing your assistant with real testers for a new round of feedback should repeat until you are happy with how your assistant handles the conversations with real testers. Once that happens, you are ready for the next step, the deployment. In this step, you will connect your assistant to a messaging platform, your own website, or any other platform you would like the users to use when talking to your assistant, collect the conversations they have with your assistant, and then keep on making the improvements based on what you can learn from real users. That sounds like a good topic to cover in the next episode of the Rasa Masterclass. So for now, make sure to test all the features that we covered in this episode, and I'll see you next time.